Number 10. The Roundabout beneath the Atlantic. Can you believe there is a place in the middle of the ocean where people drive down to the seabed to get to work? It is a place almost completely isolated from the outside world. Yet no one wants to leave. The Faroe Islands consist of 18 mountainous islands, situated between Scotland and Iceland, with a population of around 55000. It is a self-governing territory within the Kingdom of Denmark, possessing its own government, language, and identity. Don't let the beauty of this place sweep you away so completely that you forget to hit subscribe. You wouldn't want to miss out on any exciting moments. On a map, the Faroe Islands look like small fragments of rock scattered across the North Atlantic. In reality, however, many of the islands are connected by roads that cut through mountains and continue deep beneath the seabed. The Faroe Islands currently have 4 undersea road tunnels. They connect Vagar home to the archipelago's only airport with major population centers, while also linking the northern islands and communities that once relied almost entirely on ferries. The most remarkable project is the Eysturoy Tunnel, which opened at the end of 2020. The entire system is over 8 miles long, connecting the capital Tórshavn on Streymoy Island with Runavík and Strendur on Eysturoy Island. Instead of simply building a single tunnel with 2 exits, the engineers created 3 branches that meet deep beneath the seabed. This design is inspired by the traditional Faroe Islands circle dance and symbolizes how a small community can work together to accomplish seemingly impossible feats. However, the tunnel's greatest value lies not in its appearance. Previously, the journey from Tórshavn to Runavík spanned about 34 miles. Motorists had to drive around mountains and fjords, taking over an hour to reach their destination. Once the tunnel opened, the distance was reduced to approximately 11 miles, and travel time dropped to just under 16 minutes. The journey between Tórshavn and Klaksvík, the Faroe Islands' second-largest city, has also been cut from over an hour to around 36 minutes. The ocean still geographically separates the islands, but in daily life, it increasingly feels like a stretch of road running deep beneath the water. Number 9. When the weather rewrites the day. In the Faroes, a sunny morning is no guarantee that the afternoon will remain dry. Within minutes, low-hanging clouds can sweep over the mountainsides, fog can shroud the road, and wind-driven rain can lash down almost horizontally. Then, the sky might brighten again, as if the rain had never occurred. That is why locals often say that if you don't like the current weather, you simply need to wait a few minutes. This saying might sound like a joke, but it accurately reflects how life works in the archipelago. A village might be sunny, while the other side of the mountain is completely shrouded in rain and fog. The weather impacts almost every daily plan. Fishermen must check the wind, waves, and visibility before leaving port. Ferry trips to remote islands may be delayed or canceled. Helicopters cannot take off when the clouds are too low. Popular hiking trails can also become dangerous when fog obscures cliffs and marker posts. Rainfall occurs for much of the year, but temperatures in the Faroe Islands are not as extreme as the northern part of the archipelago might lead many to believe. The ocean contributes to relatively mild winters, while keeping summers cool and rarely excessively hot. The most striking change lies in the light. In summer, daylight extends almost through the night. It stays dark for only a brief period, allowing outdoor activities, fishing, and construction work to continue until very late. But when winter arrives, the situation reverses. The sun appears late, disappears early, and many days are covered by thick clouds, making the actual daylight hours even shorter. The Faroe Islands don't try to maintain a rigid schedule despite the weather. They are accustomed to changing plans, waiting for an extra ferry, or doing their work when the weather is more favorable. Number 8. When sheep own the hills. Situated between Norway and Iceland, the Faroe Islands are a group of 18 small islands in the North Atlantic, formed by ancient volcanic activity millions of years ago. It may sound like a purely geographical topic, but once people actually set foot there, the first thing they notice is surprisingly simple. There are hardly any tall trees, only wind and stretches of green hills clinging to steep black cliffs rising from the ocean. Here, three things are abundant: wind, waves, and sheep. The archipelago has about 7,000 sheep, more than the human population. Even the name FAROE is derived from Old Norse and means sheep islands. The windy climate, thin soil, and short growing season make large-scale food crop cultivation extremely difficult. However, grass grows on almost every patch of land that can cling to the mountainsides. FAROE sheep are well adapted to steep terrain, wet weather, and areas that are virtually inaccessible to agricultural machinery. For much of the spring and summer, flocks of sheep roam freely across vast pastures. However, this does not mean the sheep are ownerless. The grasslands of the Faroe Islands are divided into specific grazing zones. Herding the sheep down from the mountains is a major undertaking. The terrain is so steep that trucks and modern fencing cannot be used everywhere. Farmers must hike for hours, using sheepdogs and working in groups to guide the flocks into stone enclosures. This activity often became a shared family and community effort. In the summer, sheep were shorn by hand in many areas where machinery was difficult to operate. Wool was once one of the Faroe Islands' most important export products. Today, the industry no longer plays the same economic role as before, but knitting remains popular in daily life. To tourists, the flocks of sheep on the hillsides are part of the landscape, but to the Faroe people, they are food, clothing, property, work, and part of a system that helps the community survive on land with very few agricultural options. And the meat harvested in the autumn is not used immediately. A portion is hung in ventilated log cabins, where the cool ocean air slowly transforms it into one of the Faroe Islands' most distinctive dishes. Number 7. The festival that ends at midnight. The local cuisine still preserves traditional methods such as fermented lamb, dried in the sea breeze. For centuries, these methods have also provided one of the most important food sources, helping people survive the long winters. The Faroe Islands have a small story of identity in their biggest festival. This festival, called Ólavsøka, takes place over 2 days, July 30th and 29th, in the capital, Tórshavn. It is both a national holiday and the most important cultural, sporting, and political event of the year for the Faroe Islands. The name Ólavsøka means the Vigil of Saint Olaf, commemorating King Olaf II of Norway, who died in the Battle of Stiklestad on the 29th of July 1030 and was later canonized. For most of the year, Tórshavn remains a small and relatively quiet capital, but when Ólavsøka begins, people from all Arten Islands flock here. Ferries, buses, and tunnels bring thousands to the city center, transforming once deserted streets into the busiest gathering place in the Faroe Islands. Many people wear elaborate, handcrafted traditional costumes. These costumes are not only used for performances for tourists. Faroese people still wear them during national ceremonies, weddings, graduations, and special family occasions. Ólavsøka begins with a parade through Tórshavn. Sports clubs, city council members, brass bands, and horseback riders make their way to the central square. Afterward, an official speech is delivered to declare the start of the festival. However, the most anticipated daytime activity takes place on the water. Ocean rowing is the national sport of the Faroe Islands. Throughout the summer, clubs from various islands compete in races using traditional wooden boats. As night falls, concerts, exhibitions, meals, and social gatherings continue. People stroll through the streets of Tórshavn, greeting friends and relatives from other islands. In a community of just over 5,000 people, the festival feels like a nationwide reunion. The most special moment occurred at midnight on July 29th. Thousands of people gathered in Vaglith Square to participate in Midnattarsöngurinn, meaning midnight song. There was no need for a huge stage or elaborate fireworks display. The crowd sang old songs, modern songs, and ballads in the Faroe Islands. Number 6. Puffins living beside 15 people. In addition, the Faroe Islands are famous for their Mykine's red-crested albatross. During the colder months, most windows are closed. The village streets are deserted, and the resident community is so small that all the inhabitants know each other well. When the tourist season begins, the number of people appearing on the island can increase many times over in a single morning. Most visitors come here for the Atlantic puffins. Puffins spend most of their lives at sea. They only return to land during the breeding season, usually from mid-May to the end of August. At that time, thousands congregate on the grassy slopes and cliffs of Mykines. From a distance, puffins look quite similar to small penguins, but they can fly at high speeds and use their wings like paddles when diving underwater. Their colorful beaks only become prominent during the breeding season. When summer ends, the vibrant outer layer sheds, and the birds leave the cliffs to live in the North Atlantic for months at a time. Mykines is home to more than just puffins. The cliffs, meadows, and surrounding waters are breeding grounds for black-footed gulls, urians, fulmars, cormorants, and many other seabirds. Number 5. The aircraft operates like a bus. Have you ever considered how, when ferries cannot dock and tunnels have not yet reached the most remote islands, the people of the Faroe Islands use a mode of transport usually reserved for expensive vacations or emergency missions? The airplane? Here, helicopters aren't just for sightseeing, they're an official part of the public transport network, operating on a schedule between islands much like buses or ferries. A flight typically lasts only a few minutes. For tourists, this might be one of the most beautiful flights in the North Atlantic, but for locals, inside the helicopter might be bags of food, mail, medicine, repair tools, or passengers on their way to the hospital, school, or work. This limitation also highlights the difference between public helicopters and tourist flights. For the Faroe Islands, this isn't a luxury service. It exists so that someone living on a small island doesn't have to move to Tórshavn simply because of a lack of transportation. The Faroe Islands' population has grown rapidly for many years, but the number of new homes has not kept pace. Statistics from 2015-2022 show that the archipelago added 1,524 houses, terraced houses, and apartments, while the population increased by more than 5,600. The Faroe Islands Statistics Agency concluded that the housing shortage worsened year after year for much of this period. Number 4. An economy built almost entirely on fish. Behind the underwater tunnels, the mechanized services, and the high standard of living lies a source of income that has sustained the Faroe Islands for generations. It's not oil, technology, or tourism. It's fish. For tourists, the ocean surrounding the Faroe Islands is part of the landscape. For the locals, it's their workplace, their food source, and the foundation of almost their entire economy. The warm waters of the Gulf Stream meet the cold polar currents around the Faroe Islands, creating a nutrient-rich marine ecosystem. Cod, black cod, and saithe live near the seabed, while mackerel, herring, and blue cod migrate in large schools across the North Atlantic. These are the most important species for the Faroe Islands fishing fleet. According to the Faroe Islands government, fish and fish products typically account for 90% to 95% of the total value of exports. The fishing industry and related activities contribute approximately 20% of the GDP and employ about 15% of the workforce. This means that even if an individual does not work directly on a fishing vessel, their income may still depend on the fishing industry through sectors such as processing plants, ports, transportation, vessel repair, equipment manufacturing, or financial services. In recent years, the total amount of fish caught annually by Faroe Islands vessels has often exceeded 6,000,000 tons, divided equally among its approximately 55,000 inhabitants. That's equivalent to more than 10 tons of fish per person. Of course, The Faroe Islands don't consume all of this fish themselves. Much is processed and shipped to international markets. The Faroe Islands have jurisdiction over fishing within a 200 nautical mile zone around the archipelago, but their fleet also operates in international waters and the waters of other nations through agreements. The Faroe Islands have signed bilateral fishing agreements with the European Union, Iceland, Norway, Greenland, and Russia, allowing vessels access to different fishing grounds at appropriate times of the year. Number 3. A capital that still feels like a village. Tórshavn doesn't resemble the typical image of a capital city. The city doesn't have wide, car-filled boulevards, a subway system, or skyscrapers. The center can be explored primarily on foot. Just minutes after leaving the shopping district, one can stand by the harbor, stroll past grass-covered wooden houses, or see mountains and the ocean at the end of the street. Approximately 40% of the Faroe Islands population lives in the capital region. However, with around 205,000 inhabitants, Tórshavn remains one of the smallest capitals in the world. Its size is closer to that of a town than the political center of an entire self-governing nation. The name Tórshavn means Thor's Harbor, named after the god of thunder in Norse mythology. The city is situated on the southeastern coast of Streymoy Island and developed around a natural harbor. For centuries, it has been the most important center for trade, administration, and politics in the Faroe Islands. The city's historic center is located on the Tinganes Peninsula. Since Viking times, the Faroese have gathered on these stone slabs to pass laws, settle disputes, and deliver judgments. The origins of the Faroese parliament, known as Lagting, can be traced back over 1,000 years, making it one of the oldest surviving parliamentary traditions. Today, Tinganes remains the seat of the Faroese government. Yet, instead of glass buildings shielded by massive fences, government offices are housed in dark red wooden buildings with turf roofs, standing close together by the harbor. At a supermarket in Tórshavn, shoppers can still find almost everything that's available in Copenhagen or Oslo. The difference lies in the price and the variety. A common Danish product might become a high-end import after arriving in the Faroe Islands. Tropical fruits, Asian food, and less common brands often command even higher prices. This is particularly noticeable for women from the Philippines or Thailand. They might find familiar ingredients, but not at every store, and often pay significantly more. In 2022, the average price of a detached house in the capital region was around 3.9 million Danish kroner. In smaller towns, this figure was around 2 million kroner, and in villages, it was around 1.3 million. A house in Tórshavn could therefore cost twice as much as a house in a village further from the center. Number 2. The hunt that divides the islands. The Faroe Islands often appear in travel videos featuring green cliffs, grass-roofed villages, and roads almost devoid of traffic. Yet, there is a starkly different image that has made the archipelago the focus of global controversy: the sea turning red during the pilot whale hunt, known to locals as Times Grindadrap Times or simply Times Grind. This is not a festival held on a fixed date each year. There are no tickets, no official hunting schedule, and no way to predict exactly when it will take place. The hunt begins only when a pod of pilot whales appears near the shore, and conditions including weather, terrain, and the number of participants are favorable. According to official information from the Faroe Islands, the purpose of this activity is to provide food, not to stage a spectacle for tourists. The primary target is the longfin pilot whale, a toothed whale species that lives in the cold waters of the North Atlantic. They are more closely related to dolphins than to larger whales, and typically travel in highly social pods. This instinct to follow the pod makes them vulnerable to being surrounded by groups of boats and leads them towards shallower waters. Once a pod of whales is spotted in a suitable location, the boats form an arc behind the group and slowly herd them toward one of the designated bays. In the past, such hunts served a vital, practical purpose. The Faroe Islands have very little arable land, and a short growing season, and ship-based supply lines were easily disrupted by the weather. A single pod of whales could provide a substantial supply of meat and blubber to sustain many families for an extended period. But for animal welfare organizations, the issue isn't just whether the species is endangered. Pilot whales are social mammals with complex social structures and strong bonds among members. When the entire pod is driven into shallow waters, individual whales can witness the killing of others. The Faroe Islands authorities argue that spinal cord cutting with a spear can kill an animal in seconds, and entire herds can be quickly disposed of when the hunt is properly organized. Opponent groups, however, argue that the reality is not always ideal. Rough seas, overwhelming numbers of animals, a lack of licensed personnel, or whales stranded in inaccessible locations can prolong the process. The Faroe Islands could build roads through mountains and underwater loops within decades, but the clash between tradition and modern values may be harder to resolve than any tunnel. The Faroe Islands have very low unemployment, relatively high incomes, and a well-developed welfare system, but that doesn't mean life is cheap. The problem stems from its geographical location. The archipelago lies in the middle of the North Atlantic, has very little arable land, and possesses a market of only about 55,000 people. Aside from fish, lamb, and a few local products, most goods must be transported by ship or plane. Each shipment has to travel hundreds of kilometers across the sea. When fuel, transport, or food prices rise in Europe, Faroese people often feel the impact right at the supermarket. Between May 2020 and May 2025, food and non-alcoholic beverage prices in the Faroe Islands are projected to rise by nearly 30% in just 1 year. Up to May 2025, this group of goods is expected to increase by almost 5%, while meat prices are projected to rise by more than 10%. Local lamb prices may remain high, while beef, vegetables, coffee, butter, and many everyday products depend on external supply chains. Number 1. The islands that close for maintenance. After images of cliffs, grass-roofed villages, and puffins went viral on social media, the Faroe Islands began attracting increasing numbers of tourists. This brought jobs and income to small communities, but also created a problem that travel footage rarely reveals. Instead of simply opening more hotels and ramping up promotion, the Faroe Islands introduced an unconventional idea, temporarily closing certain tourist sites for maintenance. The initiative is titled Closed for Maintenance, Open for Voluntourism. It was first launched in April 2019, when 11 popular sites suspended regular visitor access for a weekend. Only locals and a group of international volunteers were permitted to enter to carry out conservation work. Importantly, the Faroe Islands are not closing down the entire archipelago. Airports, hotels, restaurants, and most attractions remain operational. Only selected areas are temporarily closed for a few days to allow maintenance crews to work safely. The list of affected areas also changes annually. Local authorities, tourism offices, and communities identify the areas under the greatest pressure and then propose necessary projects. These projects are not on the scale of undersea tunnels, yet they address very specific issues: a path that has become too slippery, a grassy slope suffering from erosion, or a small village unable to handle a high volume of traffic at once. Participants need not be engineers or conservation experts. They simply need to be capable of working outdoors and navigating uneven terrain. International teams work alongside Faroese volunteers and local supervisors. While visitors cover the cost of travel to the islands, the program provides accommodation, meals, and transportation for the duration of the maintenance work. In the middle of the Eysturoy Tunnel lies an intersection that most drivers in the world have never encountered, a roundabout located directly beneath the North Atlantic Ocean. The Eysturoy Tunnel, opened in late 2020, is approximately 11.2 km, 9 miles long. It connects the island of Streymoy, home to the capital Tórshavn, with the Strendur and Runnavik regions on the island of FAROE. Instead of building 3 separate tunnels, engineers designed the 3 branches to meet at an underwater roundabout. This is touted as the world's first underwater roundabout. Blue, red, and purple lights constantly change on the cliff face, making the entire space look like a giant glowing jellyfish under the ocean. Surrounding the Ferris wheel is a steel sculpture. This image is inspired by the traditional Faroe Islands circle dance and symbolizes the need for small communities to cooperate in order to survive. Drivers can even tune their radios to 97.0 FM to listen to a soundtrack specially composed for the underwater journey. But for locals, this Ferris wheel is more than just a photo spot. Elsewhere, roundabouts simply help vehicles change direction. In the Faroe Islands, an underwater roundabout helps the once separated islands function as a single community. In larger cities, they find more job opportunities, broader communities, and less limited career prospects constrained by population size. They also have more choices in love, entertainment, and lifestyle. After a few years, returning to a small town where almost everyone knows each other's families is no longer an easy decision. In 2020, men made up about 51.7% of the Faroe Islands population, while women made up about 48.5%. This gap may seem small in a large country, but in an archipelago of only about 55,000 people, it can significantly impact individual villages, schools, and dating markets. Some small islands have even higher disparities than the national average. Moving from Southeast Asia to the Faroe Islands is not simply a matter of changing addresses. A woman who grew up in the Philippines or Thailand might be leaving a place where temperatures frequently exceed 30 degrees Celsius to come to a cold, humid, and windy archipelago. Summers bring nights that are almost never completely dark. Winters, on the other hand, offer only a few hours of daylight. This change impacts every aspect of life. Clothing needs to be thicker. Walking requires careful consideration of wind and rain. Tropical fruits and vegetables, familiar spices, and many Asian products may be more expensive because they have to be imported, but the weather is often not the biggest obstacle. The new language is the deciding factor in whether a person is merely living in the Faroe Islands or truly becoming part of society. Most people can communicate in English or Danish. However, Faroese is still used at home, in the workplace, in local announcements, and in casual conversations between neighbors. A high rate of women working does not mean that all family responsibilities are equally divided. A Nordic study once showed that around 49% of Faroese women work part-time, one of the highest rates in the Nordic region. Part of the reason is that women still bear the majority of the responsibility for childcare, elderly care, and household chores. This creates a paradox. Faroese women are abundant in the labor market, but their working hours and income may be limited by family responsibilities. Football is a large part of Faroese life, and girls are increasingly appearing on the pitch. In a country with only about 55,000 people, building a women's team across all age groups is a challenge. The pool of players is small. An injury, a study abroad trip, or a move overseas can affect the entire team. Nevertheless, the Faroe Islands maintain a women's football system and host international tournaments. In 2025, the archipelago will host the European Women's U17 Championship for girls in remote villages. Football also creates a community that extends beyond their homes. Underwater tunnels allow players from many islands to train and compete together. The roads built to transport goods and connect workers now also allow a girl in a small village to get to the training ground without relying entirely on the ferry.